Earlier this year, we visited Foncombeau Abbey in France and bought this little clay sign made by one of the monks. Here I am hanging it above the front door of our new house that we're in the process of moving into. It simply reads Pax, the Latin word for peace. It calls to mind the words of Jesus in the Gospel of John when he says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid." Well, here I am, seeking the peace that the world gives that Jesus warns against by throwing myself into a fit of madness by deciding that now, on some random day, in the midst of moving and trying to get ready for all the new jobs and such, that right now, at like 11 p.m. on some weekday, was the time to rid my eyes of this bare side of the table. I started by brushing some glue on the exposed table and then sifted some dirt over that. Even if dirt lands where I don't want it, it will only stick where the glue is. After carefully vacuuming around the edges of where I had just sifted the dirt, I could then spray it with some glue to better hold it in place. So now the table looked like mud with all the wet glue. I could have paused there to let it dry, but no, that would not do. I looked at my dirt roads and that gaping absence of railroad crossings and decided to slap on some joint compound while the wet glue was drying. I was about to direct you to episode 8 on how I did my joint compound grade crossings, but I realized after going back to watch it that I never actually did the crossing, just the grade up to the tracks. Doing the actual crossing is kind of fussy because you have to have clearance for the wheels, and it's even fussier on curves because of how the flanges overhang when going around a tight bend. I used a spare set of wheels to start with, and then used a screwdriver to remove some of the compound. After that, I used a putty knife to smooth out the edges and to make sure it never exceeded the height of the center rail. After the joint compound dried, you'd think that now is where I'd test my locomotives to make sure they passed over the crossings fine, but no! I proceeded with mixing up a brown paint to use on the crossing, since my old can of brown paint was not worth salvaging from Lawrence. And then I sifted some of the last bits of sand I had from the dirt roads onto the wet paint. I was pretty darn happy with the final look, and all that was left was to tidy up the edges for the wheels and to see if our engines clear it. But first, for you ASMR-oriented folks, a clip with audio just for you of the excess gunk getting scraped off. After the immensely satisfying work of cleaning up the rails, now I would actually test my locomotives, starting with the F3s, which, to no surprise, my clearance on the middle rail was insufficient for the pickup rollers to make contact. Not to mention, too, that these old F3s had a groove worn into the rollers from years of use. Fortunately, there was no problem for my steamers, like the 736 here. Also, as an aside, you'll notice that I began adding some other greenish ground cover on the dirt from earlier to start bringing some more life to the industrial area. The siding looks like it needs some adjustment on the center rail, but like all good road maintenance, we'll defer that to another day. For now, it's on to some fun and very important roadside decorations. These are replacement crossbucks for the famous Lionel operating gatemen that were available on eBay, so I bought something like a dozen to use for my crossings on the layout. I like that they preserve the vintage feel of the table while better matching the scale, unlike the absurdly oversized operating signals that Lionel made. I'll happily use those too, but only sparingly. After getting all the crossbucks in place, I tidied up the wood shavings from drilling and turned my attention to my usual bemoaned chore, wiring. I was ready to get this crane back up and running, but before I did that, I was going to properly color-code these wires with paint so it would not just be a guessing game underneath the table again. I painted on a few different colors for each wire, then after they dried, threaded them through the top of the table and very crudely reattached them once more beneath the table. I have thought about installing some kind of connectors for the crane to the controller, but I just have yet to get around to it. Maybe with the next move, whenever that might be. Having the crane up and running again at last marked the completion of reassembling the layout. Now nothing was left to rewire. So to wrap things up, here's a couple new things for the table. During a trip to Kansas City for a wedding I played, I of course had to stop by the train shop up there, Fred's. I picked up a little clock tower, one that I had eyed for years, and I mean like showing my mom in the 2006 catalog number of years. But only now finally picked one up, and it even has a little Christmas wreath on it that I took off for now. I also picked up a set of lampposts that I had been thinking of installing around the park. But as I did that, they struck me as comically oversized, which shouldn't surprise me since it's a vintage-inspired layout, but nonetheless it got me experimenting with other spots for the lights. Like this, or this, or this, or maybe this. Oh, and one more thing I forgot to mention that I picked up, this little DHL van. This is a nod to my wife, who buys these fancy linen dresses from Lithuania, and they only ship via DHL. The van even has boxes inside, so these are her dresses arriving at the station. Anyways, when I tested the light posts, I was somewhat alarmed at how cool and bright they were. They were brand new reproductions of the original, so I expected some difference in appearance with the LED bulbs, but not this bad. So I popped the top off and just put a coat of yellow paint on the bulb itself to try to soften the look. Ah, that is much better. It isn't very bright and won't bring a lot of light, but the look will be much more inviting around the park. The last thing to do here is to get the clock set. In case you didn't know, these little clock towers from Lionel include a functioning clock inside, which is helpful for me, especially if I'm out here working late. Not that it will stop me, but at least my layout can guilt me into getting some more sleep. I needed to get a battery in, and I'm not gonna lie, I would love for this episode to end all nice and satisfying, but my phone flat out ran out of storage while I was filming this exact process, so only time will tell what happens between now and the next episode. I'm so sorry. I hate puns. But I'm a dad, so I have a canonic obligation to say them. All for now. Thanks for watching.